Hi, I'm Mark Gaylor and I'm a Sony Digital Imaging Ambassador. And this is my back button AF or back button focus video tutorial. Now this is one in a series of A to Z menus, and these videos are designed to help you master your Sony Alpha camera. Now there's a whole series of these. This is one of just 30 video tutorials, each one designed to help you master a particular area of the Sony menus. Now if this is not learning resources enough, I do create 600 and 700 page ebooks that you can download for your late model Alpha camera. Now just head over to patreon.com/Mark Gaylor to access this additional support. And as well as the ebooks, there's also a whole range, in fact there's over 30 hours of video tutorials or seminars that you can watch. This was because I was formerly a senior lecturer in photography on a commercial photography program. Back button AF, let's get a deeper dive into this subject. I'll start with showing you how to set up the camera, and then I'll talk about why some photographers choose to work with the back button focus workflow and others prefer just to use the camera standard setup. Now we have an AF on button on the back of most Sony Alpha cameras, but it's not enough just to initiate focus on the back of the camera, because focus is also still linked to the shutter release button. So we need to deep dive into the menus and go focus AF/MF and then go with AF with shutter and switch that to off. Now that AF with shutter option may require that you scroll down, because that might appear at the very bottom of this particular menu. Now the other thing that most back button autofocus photographers will want to do is set the focus mode to continuous AF or AF-C. Now on some cameras you'll find that in the menus, other cameras you might need to set that on the top dial on the top left of the camera there, such as with the A9 and A1 cameras. Third thing you're going to do is go and check that the AF on button is still assigned to AF on. It is by default, so that shouldn't be an issue. Now some photographers may also want to reassign that AF on button to tracking on plus AF on button. It isn't absolutely necessary that you do this, but if you do find yourself shooting in the single shot focus mode a lot of the time, you want to go into the AFC and tracking option when you're doing the back button autofocus workflow. So this is a way of overriding maybe a single shot AF and going into that AFC. So this is an option for some photographers that they may want to take. Now let's get on to my own personal opinion of back button autofocus. Do I personally use back button focus? And the answer is no. I work with the standard default setup of the cameras. Now nearly all of the manufacturers work with this standard setup, and that's Nikon, Canon, Pentax, etc. Back button autofocus photographers usually have to override the standard manufacturer's settings. Secondly, do I recommend that you stop using back button autofocus if you've been using it for many years? And the answer to that one is probably not. You're well set into that workflow, and reverting back to the standard manufacturer's workflow is just going to cause a few issues in the short term. Now, would I recommend this workflow for new Alpha photographers? And again, the answer is probably not. The standard workflow does not prevent you from getting a good autofocus workflow. So is back button AF a game-changing workflow? And I think probably not. There are reasons often given by the photographers who have adopted this workflow in the fact that it is easy to stop focus when the subject is static. So once you've acquired focus and the subject is static, the focus is not going to move. And then as soon as the subject starts moving, you can quickly press or depress the AF on button and then quickly move into tracking or following focus on that moving subject. And now this is a way of also avoiding focus hunting. If your subject is static, the focus isn't going to be constantly moving because you're half pressing the shutter release. Now, do these above reasons prevent Sony's default AF setup from doing its job efficiently when focus is linked to the shutter release button? And I'd have to say that in the modern Sony Alpha cameras, the focus doesn't tend to hunt when the subject is static, and so there isn't a great reason to use back button autofocus any longer. There probably was in the older DSLR days where focus was a little bit more erratic than it is today. The standard setup on a Sony Alpha camera does allow you to hold focus when you're in continuous autofocus. On the Sony lenses, all of the Sony lenses have this focus hold button, or a custom key that is assigned to focus hold by default. So if you're in autofocus, all you have to do is hold that button on the lens and autofocus is disabled. So you will have that fixed focus. So it's almost like the opposite workflow to back button focus, whereas you hold a button to stop focus rather than holding a button to initiate continuous autofocus. The other thing with modern Sony Alpha cameras, particularly now we have the Sony AI processing units with the AI focus or subject recognition. Focus is very, very sticky, and so it tends not to get upset with obstacles such as foreground leaves, tall grass or branches in front of your subject. The camera really knows what your subject is and will stay locked onto that subject. So we don't really need to disable autofocus because it is so reliable on these Alpha cameras. The late model Alpha cameras are also exceptionally good at moving from a static subject to a quickly moving subject. So long as the rest of your camera menu settings that deal with autofocus are set up appropriately for fast response, then you're going to get really good performance from your late model Alpha camera without adopting a back button focus workflow. And as you can see from these shots, I'm moving from a fixed position where the bird is just sitting to in full flight, and the camera is responding to that fast action really quite well here. What do I stand to lose if I adopt back button autofocus? Now there are a couple of things that you will lose because your thumb can be controlled to do certain things that it can't do if you're holding down the AF on button all of the time. And these three are the three that I think you're going to possibly miss. And that is the ability to move the focus point using the touchpad or multi-selector, sometimes called the joystick, while focusing. If you're holding down the AF on button, then you're basically locked into where that focus area is currently fixed on your screen. Now you're also going to restrict your recall, custom hold and AEL or automatic exposure lock options. We do have a couple of buttons on the back of the camera that we can configure to something called recall custom hold, which is a group of settings. We also have the AEL button on the majority of larger Sony cameras, and you're not going to be able to press either of those options if you're holding down the AF on button. We're also going to restrict the point and shoot capability of your camera. There are instances where you want to hand your camera to someone else to have maybe a group shot of you and your family, etc. And if you're going to have to then explain that they have to press the shutter release as well as holding another button on the back of the camera, it just reduces that point and shoot capability of your camera. So here we have a few of the options that we can do when we've got our thumb not holding down the AF on button. We have touch tracking, and we can do this on the monitor, or we can do it with the touch pad. This is where we just put our thumb onto the monitor, we get a crosshair, we can slide that across the screen, let go, and then tracking is initiated on a new part of the scene there. And there's the AEL. Now I don't use it configured to the automatic exposure lock. I use it as a recall custom hold. This is particularly useful when I'm doing sports photography and maybe I've got the camera to be shooting 20 or 30 frames per second at 1/2000th of a second, and I can reprogram the AEL button to maybe drop the shutter speed to 1/400th of a second and shoot at maybe 3 frames per second. And so this is a good override that I can't access if again my thumb is on the AF on button. What I said about the point and shoot capability, we do want to sometimes just turn the shoot mode dial to auto, hand it to someone else, and we turn our sophisticated camera into a point and shoot. This is obviously not going to happen if you need to give a little bit of a lesson to the person you've given the camera to, that it's now a 2-button configuration that they need to do. So if you found this video tutorial useful, just give me the thumbs up. Head over to patreon.com/Mark Gaylor if you need to access those ebooks, etc. I'm Mark Gaylor, Sony Digital Imaging Ambassador.